My name is Mara Whitfield, and I live alone in a small blue house on Cherry Lane in Portland, Oregon. The paint on the siding peels every summer, no matter how many times I touch it up, and the porch swing creaks each time the evening breeze comes through. Still, I love that house. I bought it 6 years ago with the savings I had scraped together for my office job and a small gift from my grandfather, Edmund Whitfield. He was the only person who ever believed I could stand on my own 2 feet. I keep a little lemon tree by the front steps, growing in a tin bucket he once used to carry nails. Every spring, it blooms and fills the air with a clean, sharp scent that makes the whole world smell honest again. My life had been quiet for a long time. Work during the week, tea on weekends, a walk to the bookstore down the street every other Friday. I didn't have much, but what I had was mine. Then 2 weeks ago, everything changed. It started with a phone call from my mother, Diane, on a Tuesday afternoon. Her tone was flat, the way she always spoke when she wanted to sound polite but meant business. "Mara," she said, "your sister's wedding is coming up next month at the family restaurant in Savannah. We need you to cover some of the leftover costs, nothing outrageous, about $18,000. She said it as though she were asking me to pick up a carton of milk. I blinked at the number. $18,000. "Mom," I said carefully, "I already sent a gift. I can't pay that. I have a mortgage. Bills. You know that." There was a pause on the line, the kind that stretches until it starts to hurt. Then my father, Robert, took the phone. His voice was firm and heavy. "If you won't help your family, you're on your own from now on." Behind him, I could hear my sister, Sophia, shouting, her voice rising higher with each word. "You greedy woman. You've never been any help to this family." The last word came out like a knife. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words froze. Then I heard the sound of the phone being hung up, and the line went dead. I sat there at my small kitchen table, the one with the scratched legs and coffee stains, staring at my hands. My paycheck from the week before lay unopened beside my cup of tea. Outside, rain began to fall softly, tapping against the window. I should have cried, maybe, or shouted, but I just felt empty. That evening, I sat on the porch swing until the light faded and the air turned cool. Across the street, my neighbor Julia Harris waved from her garden, her hands dusty from soil. I waved back half-heartedly, forcing a smile. The sky over Portland turned a deep grayish blue, the kind that looks almost like bruised silk, and I thought about the last time I had seen my parents. It had been 6 months ago, at Thanksgiving, when Sophia's engagement was announced. My mother had wept, my father had toasted, and Sophia had soaked in all the attention. I'd washed dishes alone afterward, listening to them laugh in the other room. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked from room to room, feeling the creaks in the floorboards. My house was small but honest, nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of coffee no matter how often I cleaned it. I sat by the window and thought about Grandfather Edmund. He had passed away 2 years ago, leaving behind a quiet kind of absence. When I was little, I used to sit with him on the back porch of his restaurant, Whitfield Table, in Savannah. He'd tell me stories about old towns in America and faraway places in Europe, about London fog and Paris lights, about people who built their lives from the ground up. "Stand up straight, Mara," he'd tell me. "Speak with a clear voice. Don't let anyone make you small." He was the only one who saw me that way, as capable. My parents loved him, I think, but they didn't visit much. They always said he was too old-fashioned, too stubborn. Sophia laughed at his stories and rolled her eyes at his careful ways. But I loved him. I loved how he still wrote with a fountain pen and cooked breakfast for the staff before opening the restaurant. When he died, the family had gathered for the will reading, but the lawyer had said there were delays. Papers, signatures, taxes, things no one wanted to deal with. After that, everyone just forgot about it. Everyone except me. I pulled out my phone that night and reread the last message I'd ever sent my parents before they cut me off. It was simple. "I'll still come to the wedding. I'll bring a card. That's all." I had written it without anger, just finality. I hit send and watched the blue checkmark appear. That was it. the quiet end of whatever relationship we had left. The next morning, I woke early, made coffee, and went for a walk downtown. Portland was waking up slowly. A man sweeping his store entrance, a bus sighing at a stoplight, a dog barking from a balcony. I like mornings here. They made me feel part of something steady and unchanging. At a cafe on Belmont Street, I ran into Eleanor, an old friend from college. She asked how my family was doing, and I almost laughed. I told her the truth. She frowned, stirred her coffee, and said softly, "Sometimes family thinks love means control." It doesn't. I nodded but didn't reply. When I got home that afternoon, I looked around my house again, my little blue world. I thought about what it meant to be cut off. They had taken their approval away, their name, their comfort. But what they hadn't taken was mine. My independence, my home, my peace. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and that was something my sister never understood. The following days passed quietly. I went to work, came home, watered the lemon tree, and read before bed. Still, something inside me kept turning over, restless. My parents' rejection felt like an echo that wouldn't fade. Every time I tried to let it go, I heard Sophia's voice again. "You greedy woman will never be of any help to the family." One night, I found myself sitting with an old photo album. There was grandfather, smiling in front of Whitfield table with his sleeves rolled up. My parents stood beside him, younger then, both proud and sharp-eyed. Sophia was a teenager, grinning wide. And there I was, a small, quiet girl, standing beside my grandfather, holding his hand. The look on my face was serious, but my eyes were full of something I still recognize: belief. Belief that goodness matters. Belief that fairness counts. Belief that doing right by people, even when they don't see it, means something. I closed the album and whispered to the quiet room, "I'm not greedy." Maybe I said it for myself, or maybe for him. Outside, the rain started again, light and steady. I made tea, sat on the porch, and listened to it fall. Somewhere deep down, a part of me knew that this wasn't the end of the story. My parents thought cutting me off would break me, but I knew something they didn't. Grandfather Edmund never did anything without a reason. And in the stillness of that night, I had the strange feeling that his story, and mine, wasn't finished yet. It was a gray morning when everything changed. The mail arrived late, dropped through the slot with a soft thud. I didn't notice it at first. I was washing dishes, the window fogged with steam, when I saw the corner of a cream-colored envelope peeking out from under the doormat. It looked official, stiff paper, printed lettering, no return logo except for a single line. Blake and Harrington, attorneys at law, Denver, Colorado. I wiped my hands and opened it right there in the kitchen. The letter was short but heavy with meaning. It read, "Dear Ms. Whitfield, we are pleased to inform you that the estate of Mr. Edmund J. Whitfield has now been fully settled. As the primary beneficiary, you are requested to contact our office to discuss the final disposition of assets. Please reply to schedule a call at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Thomas Blake, ESQ." I read it 3 times. The words primary beneficiary didn't quite fit in my head. Grandfather's estate? After all this time? I had almost forgotten the delays, the forms, the endless paperwork they'd said needed review. But now it was final. And they wanted me to call. For a long time, I just stood there, the sound of the faucet running behind me. Then I turned it off, dried my hands, and sat at the table. My chipped coffee mug sat beside the envelope, and the sunlight tried to break through the clouds but couldn't. My first thought wasn't excitement. It was disbelief and a faint, cautious kind of fear. That afternoon, I dialed the number listed on the letter. A woman with a calm voice answered, asked me to hold, and a moment later, a man came on the line. "Ms. Whitfield, this is Thomas Blake. Thank you for calling. Do you have a moment to speak about your grandfather's estate?" His tone was professional but kind. "Yes," I said, though my voice came out quieter than I meant. He cleared his throat. "Your grandfather spoke very fondly of you in our meetings. He wanted everything handled with respect. There were complications with the family, as I understand it." A sad smile crossed my face. "That's one way to put it." He hesitated, then continued. Well, let me begin with the essentials. Mr. Whitfield left you full ownership of his shares in Whitfield Table, LLC. That includes the restaurant itself, the land, and all related assets. My hand froze around the pencil I'd been fidgeting with. The restaurant. Yes, he said simply. It's yours now. He also left you the house in Savannah, where your parents currently reside, along with the rental cottage on the same property. I think I forgot to breathe for a second. I don't understand. My parents live there. I'm aware, Mr. Blake said. He transferred ownership to you before his death, but allowed them continued residence during probate. The transfer is now complete. My voice trembled. Is that all? He chuckled softly. Not quite. There is also a remaining sum, approximately $740,000 in liquid assets after taxes and administrative fees. He included a personal note, if I may read it to you. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. For my granddaughter Mara, thank you for being the only one who stayed. You listened, you cared, and you never asked for anything in return. Use this for your life, not for their pride. Love always, Edmund. When he finished, there was a long silence. I could hear the hum of the line, the faint buzz of his office in the background. I swallowed hard. Are you sure there's no mistake? No mistake, Mr. Blake said gently. Your grandfather signed the documents 2 months before his passing. Witnessed, notarized, sealed. He was very clear about his intentions.
I didn't know what to say.
I sat staring at the wall, where a small map of America hung in a cheap wooden frame. My eyes drifted to the southeast corner, to Georgia, where Savannah waited like a word I wasn't ready to say. When the call ended, the silence in my house felt enormous. I walked slowly from room to room. The narrow hallway, the bedroom with its faded quilt, the little office with a creaky chair. I stopped by the window, where the lemon tree stood outside in the gray light, its leaves wet with rain. For a moment, I thought I could almost hear grandfather's voice. Calm, steady, amused. He had always known how my parents treated him, how they dismissed his stories, called him stubborn, said he should sell the restaurant and move on. But he never did. A place remembers who built it, he used to tell me. Don't ever let people erase your work because they're too proud to do their own. And now, he'd left everything to me. Not because I'd asked, but because I'd stayed. That evening, I called Julia, my neighbor and oldest friend. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright. Hey, Mara. You sound strange. What's going on? I told her everything. At first, she didn't believe me either. Then she laughed softly. Mara, this is justice. I sighed. It feels like a test. Maybe it's both, she said. But whatever it is, you earned it. After the call, I made tea and sat on the porch. The rain had stopped, and the streetlights glowed on the wet pavement. Across the way, Julia's house was lit up, and I could hear faint music through the open window, an old piano piece, soft and slow. I thought about what it meant to inherit something, not just money or land, but a legacy. Grandfather's will wasn't just a gift, it was a statement. He had seen through the noise, the lies, the polished smiles. He had known who stood beside him when everyone else turned away. But I also knew what this meant for my parents. For Sophia. Once the paperwork became public, the truth would come out, and there would be no denying it. They would know that everything they'd claimed as theirs, the restaurant, the home, the land, belonged to me now. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for that confrontation. Still, deep inside, there was a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not revenge. Not even triumph. It was freedom. For the first time, I could build something that wasn't tied to their approval or their disappointment. I finished my tea, rinsed the cup, and went to bed. I didn't dream that night, but I woke before dawn, calm and clear-headed. I pulled the envelope from the table again, ran my fingers over the embossed letterhead, and whispered, "Thank you, grandfather." Outside, the lemon tree swayed gently in the early morning wind, its leaves trembling like a secret about to be told. I didn't know what I would do next, or how my family would react. But I knew this. Whatever happened now, the truth was mine to carry. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. The day of my sister's wedding came faster than I expected. I had spent the entire week checking and rechecking the documents from Mr. Blake's office, my grandfather's will, the property deeds, and the official ownership certificates. Every page confirmed it. Whitfield Table, the family restaurant in Savannah, Georgia, was mine now. And yet, I still couldn't fully believe it, not until I saw it with my own eyes. I flew out early that Saturday morning. The air in Portland had been cool and misty when I left, but when I stepped out of the airport in Savannah, the heat hit me like a soft, heavy blanket. The streets smelled of salt and magnolia, the kind of scent that sticks to your skin. I rented a small car, an old silver sedan that rattled when I pressed the brakes, and drove through the old part of town toward Bay Street, where the restaurant stood. I hadn't been back there since grandfather's funeral. The last time, I'd stood by the kitchen door and promised him silently that I would make something of myself. Now I was back, not to keep a promise, but to claim one. When I turned the corner and saw Whitfield Table, my breath caught. The same faded green sign still hung above the entrance, the one my grandfather had painted himself 20 years ago. His handwriting, elegant and sure, curved across the wood. Whitfield Table, since 1975. I stood for a moment in the parking lot, watching people bustle inside, carrying flowers, trays, and boxes. The wedding decorations were everywhere. White ribbons, gold lanterns, and a banner that read Sophia and Ethan's Forever Begins Today. For a brief second, I wanted to turn around, get back into the car, and drive straight to the airport. But then I thought of grandfather. He would have told me not to flinch. He would have said, "You stand on your truth, Mara, even if the ground shakes."
So I walked in.
Inside, the place was glowing. Strings of soft lights hung from the ceiling beams, and every table was dressed in linen and roses. A jazz band was tuning near the corner, and the smell of roast chicken and rosemary filled the air. I could hear laughter and clinking glasses, Sophia's voice, bright and loud, floating above it all. When she saw me, her smile faltered. "You came," she said, her tone caught somewhere between surprise and annoyance. "Of course," I replied. "You're my sister." She gave me a quick, dismissive glance. "Then maybe you can make yourself useful. The caterer needs help setting up the dessert table." Before I could answer, Mom appeared, elegant as always in her pale peach dress, holding a clipboard. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mara," she said curtly, "I wasn't sure you'd show up. You didn't RSVP." "I didn't need to," I said quietly. "I own the place." She blinked. "What?" But before she could ask again, Dad came over, his face tight. "Let's not make a scene," he muttered. "It's Sophia's day." I said nothing. I just gave a small nod and walked past them toward the manager's office. My heart was pounding, but my steps were steady. Inside the office, Mr. Blake was already waiting, just as he'd promised. He stood beside Lorna, the restaurant manager, holding a thin folder. He gave me a firm nod. "Are you ready, Ms. Whitfield?" I took a deep breath.
Yes.
"Let's do it." When we stepped back into the main room, the music had started. Guests filled the tables, chatting and laughing, glasses of champagne already raised. The band was playing a slow, sweet tune, and Sophia stood by the stage, radiant in her white gown. Her fiancé, Ethan, was at her side, looking nervous but happy. I walked to the center of the room, near the cake table, a towering creation of white frosting and sugar roses, and called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Everyone, please stop for a moment." The room quieted. The band trailed off mid-note. Heads turned. My mother's eyes widened. "Everyone get out of here," I said clearly. "This event is not authorized. The restaurant is closed as of today." For a few seconds, no one moved. Then a murmur rippled through the room, sharp and confused. Sophia stared at me as though I had lost my mind. "Mara, what in the world are you talking about?" I looked straight at her. "This restaurant is mine. Grandfather left it to me. The land, too. And the house Mom and Dad live in. You've been using property that doesn't belong to you. There is no approved event here today. This is a legal notice of possession." Gasps broke out. My mother's hand flew to her chest. My father turned pale. Mr. Blake stepped forward, his voice calm and professional. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm attorney Thomas Blake, representing Ms. Mara Whitfield, legal owner of Whitfield Table, LLC. This property is no longer under the authority of Robert or Diane Whitfield. I must ask everyone to vacate the premises immediately. A stunned silence followed, then chaos. Guests whispered and grabbed their coats. The band began packing up instruments. Someone dropped a glass, and it shattered on the floor. Sophia's face turned bright red. You hateful woman, she screamed. You ruined everything. You always wanted to destroy me. At least I didn't ask someone else to pay for my wedding, I said, my voice trembling but strong. She took a step toward me, fists clenched, but Ethan caught her arm. Sophia, stop, he said quietly. His face was pale, his jaw tight. Let's just go. My father finally spoke. Mara, this is cruel, he said in a low voice. You could have handled this privately. I met his gaze. You cut me off like I was nothing. You told me I was on my own. Well, here I am, on my own. Mr. Blake began handing notices to the staff and management. Lorna, bless her, was pale but composed. I'm sorry, she told the guests gently. We'll contact everyone for refunds. As the last of the guests drifted out, the restaurant fell silent. The candles flickered on the tables, and the scent of rosemary still hung in the air. I walked over to Lorna and handed her a check for $2,000. For your staff, I said. No one should go home unpaid. She nodded, eyes glistening. Thank you, Ms. Whitfield. When the doors finally closed, only my parents, Sophia, Ethan, Mr. Blake, Lorna, and I remained. My father's shoulders sagged. My mother's face was drawn tight with disbelief. This isn't over, my mother said coldly. Yes, it is, I replied. It was over the day you all decided I didn't matter. No one spoke after that. Mr. Blake quietly gathered the papers, and I turned toward the door. As I stepped outside into the warm Savannah air, I heard the faint hum of cicadas and the echo of my own heartbeat. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the quiet daughter, the overlooked sister. I felt like someone who had finally claimed her own voice. The restaurant lights behind me flickered, then went dark. And for once, I didn't look back. The restaurant was silent after everyone left. The soft lights still glowed above the empty tables, and the smell of flowers and roasted herbs lingered in the air. I stood there in the quiet dining room, surrounded by the pieces of a celebration that had fallen apart. My mother sat at a table, her mascara smudged. My father stared at the floor like a man who had lost his map. Sophia stood near the cake, still in her wedding dress, breathing hard but saying nothing. I could hear the clock ticking behind the bar. No one moved. Then my mother spoke. Mara, we're sorry, she said, her voice shaking. We were angry. We said things we shouldn't have. But this is too much. Can't you see what you've done? Give us a share, at least. We helped build this place, too. I looked at her, at both of them, and for a moment, I almost wanted to cry. Not for them, but for the years wasted trying to be good enough. My eyes drifted to the photographs on the wall. My grandfather, Edmund Whitfield, smiling beside the old grill. My parents in their younger years, proud and polished, and one photo of Sophia and me as little girls, our noses dusted with flour as we baked with grandfather. I remembered how he'd make us count the register each night and tell us, work hard, girls. A table is just wood until you give it meaning. I thought of all those nights I stayed behind helping him close, while my parents complained that he was too slow or too stubborn. I remembered fixing the restaurant sign when it loosened in a storm, while Sophia stayed home painting her nails. None of them ever saw that work. But grandfather had. And in the end, he had seen me clearly enough to trust me with everything he built. I took a slow breath. You cut me off when I said no to $18,000, I told them quietly. You called me greedy. You stood beside Sophia when she shouted at me. You didn't care about me, only about what I could give you. Grandfather left this to me because he saw who truly stood by him. This isn't about punishment. It's about respect. My father's jaw worked, like he was grinding stones in his mouth. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Sophia didn't look up. For the first time, she seemed small to me, not because she'd lost something, but because she'd never built anything herself. My mother reached out, a trembling hand.
Please, Mara. Give us something.
Anything. We're still your family. I looked at her, then shook my head. No, I said softly. I'll take care of this place the right way. I'll make sure every worker here is paid fairly. I'll keep the house and rent it honestly. I'll rebuild the kitchen and repair the porch where grandfather used to sit. But I won't share it with people who only came around when they needed something. You're excluded from the property and from my life. The words felt heavy, but also clean. I had carried guilt for so long that I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to stand tall. I reached into my purse and pulled out a ring of keys, old ones grandfather used to keep in his pocket. I set them on the table, then slid them back toward myself. These stay with me, I said. Sophia finally spoke, her voice hoarse. You're going to regret this, Mara. I met her eyes.
No, Sophia.
For once, I won't. Mr. Blake cleared his throat quietly, signaling that everything was settled. I thanked him, then turned toward the door. My parents stayed seated, silent and still. Sophia turned away, and I didn't look back. Outside, the night air was warm and heavy. The lights from the restaurant spilled out behind me like a fading glow. Mr. Blake locked the door and handed me the folder with a final deed. It's all official now, he said gently. I nodded. I walked alone down to the river that ran through Savannah, the water slow and silver in the moonlight. The city around me was quiet except for a few cars and the distant sound of laughter from some open bar window. I sat on a bench, took a deep breath, and felt a strange calm wash over me. The next morning, I booked a flight back to Portland and spent the night at a small hotel near the square. It cost me $145 with tax, but I didn't mind. I slept better than I had in years. When I got home, I painted my blue house again, planted rosemary by the steps, and polished the porch swing until it gleamed. I put $50,000 aside to renovate the restaurant, $120,000 into a fund for the staff, and the rest into savings. I didn't flaunt the money. I just lived, quietly, honestly, freely. Sometimes at dusk, when I sit outside and the wind moves through the lemon tree, I imagine my grandfather sitting beside me again. I can almost hear him say, "Stand up straight, Mara. Speak with a clear voice." And I do, because at last my voice and my life belong only to me.